Hi guys, I'm so glad that you're here. I'm a little bit sick. So I have a fever and I'm sweaty and gross. But I wanted to jump on here and talk about the elections. I think that it's pretty much off topic of my YouTube channel, but my YouTube channel has just begun, so I think it's okay if I'm all over the place. I'm pretty sure no one's gonna critique me too hard. Sorry, I'm like sweating. um, but I just hope that you can come with some grace to understand that I'm doing this because I want to just share some hope and some light as a believer, what you can stand on in these times. And I just also wanted to kind of let you know that I'm going to be reading a lot of scripture, so this is also going to be a little bit different in that aspect as well. So with all of that said, I wanted to first share that I voted for President Trump. And I think it's interesting because a lot of people, they never say who they voted for, which I think is weird. They act like it's some big secret that they can't tell anyone or else they might offend someone, or I don't really know what it is. But the reason I voted for him was really because I just think that he supports a lot of Christian beliefs. Am I saying that I think he is a born again Christian? I can't say that for sure. But I do like the fact that he is definitely in support of saving babies' lives. And so any president who is for saving the lives of unborn babies is someone that I can get behind. With that said, I think that in times like this where we are just bombarded with so much evil and so much uncertainty, it can be really scary for a believer. It can be really scary because we're just wondering, like, where is the certainty? What can we hope in? Because really our confidence and just even our voting system has really been destroyed. And I think if you are kind of keeping up with this whole election, it can be disheartening just watching everything that's going on. And so I just wanted to share some scriptures that God has been specifically ministering to me in hopes to help you. So this is the part where I get into some scriptures. I have a New Living New International Version. I don't know why I said New Living. NIV. So that's what I'll be reading out of. And the first place I'm going to start is Exodus chapter 14. And if you have been watching my videos, you'll know that I've kind of already talked on this chapter, so this is a little bit of a review. But Exodus chapter 14, and kind of what is going on here is the Israelites were in slavery and they cried out to the Lord, and the Lord heard their cry, and he brought plagues on the Egyptians to have the Egyptians set them free from captivity, but it took all these plagues to finally let the people go. And so here we are in Exodus chapter 14. The Israelites have been released from slavery, and the Lord brings them along this path, and he I'll just start reading it. In verse 1, we're going through this whole chapter, guys, so get ready, get prepared for me not to make eye contact with you. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Tell the Israelites to turn back and encamp near Pi Hahiroth between Migdol and the sea. They are to encamp the sea directly opposite of Baal-zeron. Pharaoh will think the Israelites are wandering around in the land in confusion, hemmed in by the desert. And I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and he will pursue them, but I will gain glory for myself through Pharaoh and all his army, and the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord." So the Israelites did this. When the king of Egypt was told that the people had fled, Pharaoh and his officials changed their minds about them and said, "What have we done? We have let the Israelites go and have lost their services." So he and his chariots made ready and took his army with him. He took 600 of the best chariots along with all of other chariots of Egypt, with officers over all of them. The Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, so that he pursued the Israelites, who were marching out boldly. The Egyptians, all Pharaoh's horses and chariots, horsemen and troops, pursued the Israelites and overtook them as they camped by the sea near Pi Hahiroth opposite of Baal-zeron. Verse 10. As Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up, and there were the Egyptians marching after them. They were terrified and cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, "Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? Didn't we say to you in Egypt, 'Leave us alone. Let us serve the Egyptians'? It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert." Moses answered the people, "Do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring to you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only be still." Then the Lord said to Moses, "Why are you crying out to me? Tell the Israelites to move on. Raise your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea to divide the water, so that the Israelites can go through the sea on dry ground. I will harden the heart of the Egyptians so that they will go in after them, and I will gain glory through Pharaoh and all his army, through his chariots and horsemen. The Egyptians will know that I am the Lord when I gain glory through Pharaoh, his chariots, and his horsemen." Then the angel of God, who had been traveling in front of the Israel army, withdrew and went behind them. The pillar of cloud also moved from in front and stood behind them, coming between the armies of Egypt and Israel. Throughout the night the cloud brought darkness to one side and light to the other side, so neither went near the other all night long. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and all the night the Lord drove the sea back with strong east winds and turned it into dry ground. The waters were divided. The Israelites went through the sea on dry ground, with a wall of water on their right and on their left. The Egyptians pursued them. All the Pharaoh's horses and chariots and horsemen followed them into the sea. During the last watch of the night, the Lord looked down from the pillar of fire and the cloud the Egyptians' army and threw it into confusion. He made the wheels of their chariots come off so that they had difficulty driving. The Egyptians said, "Let's get away from the Israelites. The Lord is fighting against Egypt." Then the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the sea so that the waters may flow back over the Egyptians and their chariots and horsemen." Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and at daybreak the sea went back to its place. The Egyptians were fleeing toward it, and the Lord swept them into the sea. The water flowed back and covered the chariots and the horsemen. The entire army of Pharaoh had followed the Israelites into the sea. Not one of them survived. But the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground, with the wall of water on their right and on their left. That day the Lord saved Israel from the hand of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians lying dead on the shore. And when the Israelites saw the great power the Lord displayed against the Egyptians, the people feared the Lord and put their trust in him and Moses his servant. And I wanted to share that story because God, he works in impossible situations. His people were up against an army, 600, and they were up against the sea. And up until that point, no one had ever seen a sea part before. And we haven't seen a sea part since. And I think that is just so important for us as believers to remember the same God who split the Red Sea is the same God who we serve in this time of uncertainty, in this time where Satan wants us to be fearful. He wants us to be afraid and think that God is not in control. God is in control. And no matter the outcome of this election, the Lord is still in control, and we need to have a heart posture that is not terrified. I think there is so much to be learned in the book of Exodus, like I've said, to read through it and to understand the heart posture that God wants us to have as believers. And I actually am going to turn once again to another really great book on how to have the correct heart posture when you're up against an impossible situation. So get ready for some more reading. So 1 Samuel chapter 17, and we are going to read about someone who had a heart posture that brought him before the king. So 1 Samuel chapter 17, talking and finding this book is proving to be difficult, especially when you're sick. Okay, so I am going to start this in verse 17 of 17. So it says, "Now Jesse said to his son David, 'Take this ephah of roasted grain.'" I'm not sure how you pronounce a lot of these words, so don't crucify me in the comments. "And these 10 loaves of bread for your brothers, and hurry to their camp. Take along these 10 cheeses to the commander of their unit. See how your brothers are, and bring back some assurance from them. There was Saul and the men of Israel in the valley of Elah fighting against the Philistines. Early in the morning, David left the flock with a shepherd, loaded up and set out as Jesse had directed. He reached the camp as the army was going out to its battle positions. Shouting the war cry, Israel the Philistines were drawing up their lines facing each other. David left his things with the keeper of the supplies, ran to the battle lines, and greeted his brothers. As he was talking with them, Goliath, the Philistine champion from Gath, stepped out from his lines and shouted his usual defiance, and David heard it. When the Israelites saw the man, they all ran from him in great fear. Now the Israelites had been saying, 'Do you see how this man keeps coming out? He comes out to defy Israel. The kings will give great wealth to the man who kills him. He will also give him his daughter in marriage and will exempt his father's family from taxes in Israel.' David asked the men standing near him, 'What will be done for the man who kills the Philistine and removes his disgrace from Israel? Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?' They repeated to him what they had been saying and told him, 'This is what will be done for the man who kills him.' When Eliab, David's oldest brother, heard him speaking with the men, he burned with anger at him and asked, 'Why have you come down here, and with whom did you leave these few sheep in the desert? I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. You come down only to watch the battle. Now what have I done, said David. Can't I even speak? He then turned away to someone else and brought up the same matter, and the men answered him as before. What David was overheard and reported to Saul, and Saul sent for him. David said to Saul, let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go fight him. Saul replied, you are not able to go against this Philistine and fight him. You are only a boy, and he has been fighting men from his youth. But David said to Saul, your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from a flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. Your servant has killed both lion and bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defiled the armies of the living God. The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine. Saul said to David, go, and the Lord be with you. Then Saul dressed David in his own tunic, and he put a coat of armor on him and bronze helmet on his head. David fastened on his sword and the tunic and tried walking around because he was not used to them. I cannot go in these, he said to Saul, because I am not used to them. So he took them off. Then he took his staff in his hand and chose 5 smooth stones from the stream. He put them in a pouch in his shepherd's bag, and with the sling in his hand approached the Philistine. Meanwhile, the Philistine, with his shield-bearer in front of him, kept coming closer to David. He looked David over and saw that he was only a boy, rowdy and handsome, and he despised him. He said to David, am I a dog that you come at me with sticks? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. Come here, he said, and I will give you flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field. David said to the Philistine, you come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord, the Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defiled. This day the Lord will hand you over to me, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. Today I will give the carcasses of the Philistine armies to the birds of the air and the beasts of the earth. And the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel, and those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves. For the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all you into our hands. That's one of the best verses. All the Philistines moved closer to attack him. David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet him. Reaching into his bag and taking out a stone, he slung it and struck the Philistine on the forehead, and the stone sank into his head, and he fell face down on the ground. So David triumphed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone. Without a sword in his hand, he struck down the Philistine and killed him. And I'll stop right there. I think there's such an amazing contrast here between the Israelites and how God saved them despite the fact that they were so little in faith, and how God also saved David. But we just get to see how David got to experience such an amazing victory because he knew who was in control. He knew that the Lord was in control. And I just want to, again, in verse 47 here, it says, all those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands. Really, the battle that we're facing, really a battle of good versus evil. The Lord is the victory. Even if we as believers have to suffer. A lot of Christians are suffering persecution in foreign countries, and I think it's really wise as Americans to know that we are not promised freedom in the Bible. In the Bible, it promises us suffering. In the Bible, it promises us to endure hardships, and all through, I believe this first 7 books of Revelation talk about overcoming. And I really think as believers, we need to start having a heart posture that we're going to overcome. And it may not be that we have an easy life here anymore. It may be that we suffer. It may be that we go through hard times. But in the end, to know that even when we're against the impossible, even when we have just everyone mocking us, really how Goliath mocked David, we can still be secure in the Lord. We can still hope in the Lord. And that's really what I wanted to get across in this season for you, is to have a hope and a posture that the Lord is still in control. And the last verse or chapter I wanted to go over, don't worry, this one isn't so long, is Daniel 2 and verses 21 and 22. It says, "He," talking about God, "changes times and seasons. He sets up kings and disposes them. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to the discerning. He reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what lies in darkness, and light dwells with him." And really, we can take comfort in knowing that whoever is in charge, whoever in presidency, the Lord has set that person up. And as much as I hate to say, there may be people that God sets up as judgment on America for just the sin that we've been in, just the rebellion against God. God will not be mocked. He is not going to let his children just live in open rebellion before he is going to put judgment on them. And I think it's very wise as believers to be praying, to be asking the Lord to have mercy on us and to forgive us as a country for just the sin that we've allowed in and the wickedness that we've allowed in, but also to know that God is still in control, and to not be afraid even if we do have to suffer, even if we lose our freedoms. That in the hardest times, if you look at history, in some of the hardest times, that's when Christianity flourished the most. And I hate to say that, I don't want to go through really hard times, but to have a heart posture to know that you are going to be the light in those hard times, to ask the Lord to give you the strength to just live differently in a world that is full of darkness and full of hopelessness, to be the hope and to be the light no matter what your circumstances are, to be like David and go before the Goliath, whether you are facing death or facing persecution, whatever it may be, to know that God is on your side. And we don't have to fear death because the victory is really the Lord's. And so I hope this video kind of encourages you just to put your mind at rest of this election, no matter what happens, that God still loves you. He still has a plan for you and a purpose for you, and that you can survive. Even in hard times, you can still survive because the Lord is our provider. He's our protector, and he is our hope in the last days. And I just pray that you are blessed, and hopefully you come back for more Christian single encouragement.